Hi, I'm Joe Quirk. Welcome to the Blue Frontiers podcast about seasteading, the environment, special economic zones, and innovation in science, technology, governance, and society itself. People can do almost everything better. That's why Blue Frontiers will provide innovators with sustainable, peaceful, floating islands based on voluntary cooperation and deploy them around the world to help communities adapt to sea level change and promote emergent and self-organized ways of living free at sea. This is the Founders Series of the Blue Frontiers podcast. Today we have Egor Ryjikov, my friend and managing director and co-founder of Blue Frontiers. Egor is a wildly successful entrepreneur, engineer, and inventor who together with his business partner employs about 600 people. But before Egor did any of that, he spent several years in an ashram, which is an Indian monastery. Egor is such a force of calm and wisdom. The rest of us call him the Oracle. You're going to enjoy this conversation where Egor shares his vision of seasteading. Now, here's your host, the Seavangeless, Nathalie Mezza-Garcia.
Hello, seasteaders. I'm here with Egor Ryjikov. He's a co-founder and managing director of Blue Frontiers, and he's been involved with the seasteading movement for many years. He's a self-taught inventor, and he orbitates somehow around the field of engineering. He runs 12 engineering companies, but he's not himself an engineer. He's actually much cooler. So, Egor, how do you describe yourself?
Well, I'm, I guess, I would love to call myself inventor. So this is what I have been doing since maybe age of 6. So when I started my first notebook with writing my inventions. So I remember my first invention was like a special robot that would go from one mountain at moon to another, and going over this craters and I still like to solve technical problems, whether in that we have in our company or something that I'm of or areas where I'm passionate about, like seasteading. So, and the second maybe side of me is I'm also very curious about inventing business models or looking for new products, and this helped us with my partner to run this Weber Co-Mechanics group of companies, which now I think it's around maybe 16 companies, which is dealing with industrial equipment, with robotics, with medical equipment, with production and designing of tools, and all sort of integration. This entrepreneurship is another passion of mine and area which I'm very curious about.
There is a lot of areas that I see can intersect with seasteading in the future.
Yeah, this is what we are, I think, are trying to do with the concept of a sea zone that now we're building in French Polynesia. So this area where different business models could be tested in a friendly environment and in the Blue Frontiers itself. So we're now discussing floating agriculture. We're discussing different business models that we could implement on floating platforms already on initial phase of our project. And also I see a lot of people who are with their ideas, with their startups, are being attracted to what we're doing.
What type of companies or startups do you think are going to be more attracted to become part of the Blue Frontiers ecosystem or from seasteads?
Oh, it depends on area and also on on our facilities there. So well, lower hanging fruit for us if we are in French Polynesia. So this would be services and businesses focused on tourists. So it's very easy because area is so beautiful, and this lagoons are fantastic. And also this is a part of creating this first communes of people, and so people with alike ideas would come there. And I wouldn't be surprised so that we would start to do this project, how to say, project-based tourism pretty soon, maybe even before we will get floating platforms. So because French Polynesian government is likely to help us to get land on one of islands where we would able to do something even before we get floating islands.
A base camp, a land base camp, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Can you go?
I already see this base camp, middle of nowhere, beautiful sea, palms, lagoon, and maybe some installation, some artistic installation, something what we see at Burning Man or some artistic, very simple but beautiful organic shapes, domes, where people would already start to experiment with technologies on water purification, on clean energy, on waste processing, on agriculture. So we don't really need to have floating islands to start to develop these technologies, and we already, well, I think, have almost everything to start this.
What are those technologies that attract you the most about seasteading? Or what attracted you to seasteading in the first place? Do you remember your first encounter?
Yes, I remember this very well. It's happened about 12 years ago in Shanghai, and I was standing at one of the towers there. It was at a tower of a modern art museum, drinking coffee. There was cafeteria nearby, looking at this fantastic new buildings around from this terrace. And suddenly I got this picture where I saw a similar, very innovative, beautiful structures, but floating in oceans, and this idea really startled me. And since that time I just keep thinking about this. I was doing some designs and start to learn about shipbuilding. I started to learn about these concrete technologies, and after a few years ago, speaking of this history part, on Live Journal, I found a blog of Patrick Friedman, and so it was probably the first person I found who was thinking that, well, this idea, who had similar ideas, and we exchanged some emails, and I think maybe 1 or 2 years later, Patri started the Seasteading Institute.
Oh wow! So you were involved since the very beginning.
Yeah. So this idea, I believe, came in 2005, 2006 in Shanghai, and later, I got this contact. And I went. I also remember in 2009 I went to this first seasteading conference in San Francisco.
Wow! What do you remember from it?
Well, I remember I was very impressed by Patri, by his talk, and also by how many people how many people got there, and the range of these ideas. And I think during that week I genuinely start to believe that, well, this is reality, and very soon so we will get first prototypes. And yeah, I got a fuel for creativity, and it was significant. It was very significant event for me.
And here you are. I know that last week you went to a conference in the Netherlands called Floating Futures.
Yeah, this was also an extremely interesting event, and for me quite a unique because it was focused on what we call in our community what we call seasteading. So, and there I saw I saw professionals from marine industry, governmental officials, shipbuilders, people from some registries. So a lot of professionals who are already been working, who are very deep into all sort of projects, and the width of these projects is incredible. So it was one company came there with a project of a floating airport, and
Wow.
this is not just a pie in the sky. So this is a real project that they are discussing, real company. Another interesting encounter was this gentleman from Japanese very large Shimizu Corporation, and so this is a company which is offering now a concept which is well designed of a 1 kilometer floating high scraper. And it's a very elaborated concept,
Oh.
and so and there are many other projects like that. So another so there was also a presentation from Blue 21 from our friends and partners. And Karina Chapevska, she had also very interesting talk about their work and her view on the future of on the floating future. Also, what I remember is there was also a company with a floating farm. So they presented this concept. A lot of interesting meetings, and I hope that maybe within a year or two we would able to make finally would able to make another conference with 300-400 people plus in Venice, because I believe this is one of the best place to run this seasteading conference.
Yes, especially now that the pilot project for seasteading is in French Polynesia, which has around 118 islands, and Venice also has the same number.
Yeah, how is it possible? Such a coincidence.
Uh-huh. And Venice was founded by people who were also trying to push the barrier of what could be done. So there are also social similarities between Venice and seasteading. But you mentioned floating farms, and I heard you once talking about how could we have some floating farms also near the seastead, where it was cylindric. I don't know if you remember. You draw a cylindric floating farm with a little robot in the middle that was the one in charge of inspecting the crops. Can you share that really cool idea with everybody who's listening to us, please?
As I said before, so I have been involved with robots for the last maybe 8 years, and I think in agriculture we still to this moment we have one of the lowest productivity per person, and also conditions in where conditions of work are not very comfortable, and more automation is coming there. And I think the ultimate automation with robots that would be doing everything in these greenhouses, it's already feasible. It's already feasible, and I think it's just a matter of a year or two before this would happen. And there are a lot of advantages to this. First of all, it's known that productivity of a crop could grow more than 20% if greenhouse would be filled with CO2.
Okay.
So, and of course, any human worker would not be able to sustain such atmosphere.
Yes.
It would be dangerous, and for human workers to go inside, so it's necessary to ventilate everything, to leave this CO2 away, then refill it back. But robots, they have no problem, so they would be able to work in this inhuman atmosphere. But there is another part, is that we tend to build greenhouses as kind of anthropomorphic, that would be suitable for humans to work comfortably. But to work there, so they should be stable, they should be, of course, safe, they should be high enough. But for most of the crops, it's not necessary to. I mean, the scale is not important. So, and we could save a lot if we would make these greenhouses comfortable just for robots alone, that are not very picky about the environment. So, and in this way, we could make possible this floating greenhouses. And so, yeah, these greenhouses might be how to say, wobbly, so they wouldn't be maybe comfortable for human workers, but for robots it's okay. And the project that we discussed and we have been discussing is maybe to go as far as to create inflatable greenhouses. So this inflatable structures, and fill them with CO2 and let plants to convert CO2 into food and oxygen. So in this way, we could scale up this greenhouses. We could save a lot of energy, because also there is a huge synergy between floating greenhouses and ocean, because water would cool down these greenhouses.
Yes.
And this is a very important expense for greenhouses, is to cooling down them. So it's very, 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 very good combination, and there is no lack of space. So this we do, and I believe we don't need vertical farms in ocean, because ocean is so big. Why we need to go up? We can just spread over the surface in ocean.
That's true, because the whole concept of vertical farm comes from the lack of urban space.
Yeah, this urban farming, which is a great concept to shorten the distance between end user and producer.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say this vertical farms, but besides that, well, ocean is there, and if we really want to produce a lot of food to stop hunger, to be able to bring food very close to areas like in Africa. So yeah, maybe ocean is much better area than even land-based farms.
Yes. Also, another use for the water's capacity to cool is floating data centers. You've also mentioned floating data centers in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So floating, well, already this existing data centers in developed countries, they could consume 2 or up to 3%, and there is a tendency of this percentage to grow up. So and we're talking about huge capacities, energy capacities that eventually become heat.
Yeah.
And if it's also if it's powered by coal, so it's the byproduct is a lot of CO2, lot of exhaust. Floating data centers is like greenhouses. Half almost something like a half of energy that we feed into online data centers goes into cooling.
Yeah. Yes.
So and in water, if we put them in ocean, well, this problem would be solved. And another very interesting, I think, opportunity is to take energy straight from ocean, like in French Polynesia, for example, where we start our project. If you just go maybe 800 meters or 1.5 kilometers down there, the water temperature would be maybe just 6 degrees above freezing temperatures, and above it's very warm.
Wow.
And this huge temperature gradient is and this huge thermal mass of water underneath and atop is a source of almost unlimited energy. So we don't even need to talk about this floating solar farms, which is another possibility. And this is also a still untapped possibility, because there are still, even to this moment, we don't see many solar farms in ocean. And it's very likely that we're at the break-even point when suddenly we will see a lot of projects like that.
Yes, I believe so too. I think so too. Yes. So how about AI? What uses, or how do you see AI playing a role on seasteading and floating structures?
Well, I guess that very soon we will see AI almost everywhere. And we cannot avoid this. But there is one area where I guess AI would be extremely helpful, is application of AI in sharing economy. It's because if we're in a modern city, so we can get anything very pretty soon by Amazon or going into one of the malls. But if we're in a remote island like Tahiti or somewhere, and we need something, something which is not immediately available, so we need to wait a lot of days, at least a lot of hours to get it delivered, and it wouldn't be cheap to get it delivered. And I think for islands, it's very important to work on development of sharing economy models, businesses, concepts. And if we look at floating village, because we are not building yet floating city, it's too early to say, but if we have a community of 200, 300, 400 people, I don't think that each of these 200, 300 people, each of us needs to buy one electrical drill that we would probably use once or twice a year. So it just makes no sense. So we need to organize this sharing of tools, of spare parts, because it just makes no sense to. In general, it's getting less and less. It makes no sense to own things now and in coming years. So we don't really need things. We need use. We need results of work of these things.
Yes.
And AI, I think, could anticipate needs of people and anticipate when how to share some resources, how to evaluate each one's input and to do some kind of management and to be very and to do this in the most efficient, anticipating manner. And I guess we would see a lot of models, also governance models, based on optimization when AI would work with complex systems that you are specialist in.
Yes, no, and also there have been there have been many things written about what would happen if we had a robot or an AI as a politician, because just like we have given some form of legal personhood to naturals, to some, okay, to two natural systems, a river and a forest. There have some people have also said, okay, eventually as we anthropomorphize more AI and as we make it more part of our lives, we might have to consider the possibility to also give robots or AI some form of legal personhood. And in the nation state based world in which we live, if you have legal personhood, then in theory you can become a governor or a politician. So yes, it is a very fascinating subject to think what can happen. And some people say, no, you need a human component because no matter how well you optimize, when you have a complex system, there is not such thing as an optimal. So you need some human input to determine ethical issues, for example. What do you think?
This of course depends on application and also on I guess stakeholders and their voluntary agreement with some conditions, and some people would maybe would not agree to some conditions or some services or terms of use of some services that would involve AI, because AI to make AI systems efficient, they would need transparency, and to make them really efficient, they would need, I guess, full transparency. And not all people would agree to that. Yes. There are probably some solutions. Maybe I could imagine, for example, that if let's say myself or you would not like to disclose everything about your habits, what you like to do, what you like to buy, etc. So maybe you would have your own AI agent that would book timing in some timing in schedules of other people, that would buy some stuff for you and in the most undisclosed way. So they're probably going to be a very interesting time with this AI. I want to share one thing that I'm kind of puzzled with AI, is that these systems could become actually so good that we would just agree on all this tiny text on all conditions, and we would able, just to drop all information, and we would experience like that AIs would arrange, like if we would give AI full control over our schedule, so AI would, and schedules and all, if our friends also would give this control, this AI could do amazing work. So we would meet right people, right times, we would be just in right like areas where people discussing topics that are interesting for us. We would be AI would determine what people of interest we should meet on during our flight or during our shared taxi drive, and so everything starts to become like magic. But there is a danger that we would not able to function without this. So we would we would just have as this overlord which would do everything super efficient. It would be so good, but you cannot live this space, because if you would live it, suddenly you are outside of amazing this magical world of super efficiency, of lot of fun, of your how to say, your needs and your wish being anticipated, and so and I'm not sure that this would be for humanity, this kind of environment, if it would be the optimum model of functioning. Maybe yes, maybe no, and I would be really afraid to think if this AI would have some agenda, like self-inflicted, or maybe embedded inside, like this society need to function, but maybe this society needs to become better controlled, or this society needs to become, this particular society needs to become more, should become much better at I don't know, at defense activity or on that. So lot of implications. It could be heaven, it could be hell, or something in between.
Yeah, so not, it doesn't even have to be so extreme. Have you heard of the red paperclip? It's not a paradox. Okay, let's call it paradox in AI, where there's an AI that has the only task of creating red paperclips. So,
oh, sorry, of creating
red paperclips. So
all right, okay, yes.
That's all it cares about. It doesn't have any political goals. It doesn't have any single inclination. It just wants to make red paperclips. So what if it sees humans as an impediment of maximizing the number of paperclips it can do? Because it doesn't have any other intrinsic guidance, just the ones that it's programmed into it, then it might not have the capacity to distinguish. So it doesn't even need to be a scenario of an agenda. It can be just part of a simple programming. But I was thinking when you were mentioning your unsolved puzzle about AI, that by then we might not be humans, but post-humans and transhumans. So maybe this world where AI mediates everything is a world where it's the evolution of what we have today with the internet. And we are not seeing the internet as a tool that has fully killed our social relations, not yet at least. It's simply embedded into our daily lives. So maybe if it's something that would take place today, in the type of humans that we are, it would be more disruptive, but perhaps by then it would be better integrated. Now, where do you stand in terms of the pessimism of technology or a more optimism perspective? Because, well, you're building seasteads. That's very optimistic.
Yes, it's very optimistic, but in general, I guess if we wouldn't kill each other with technologies, or with presence of technologies, or without technologies, I think otherwise we would have a very bright future. It's so we have such a huge advances in with poverty, where it's also with this hygiene introduction in so many societies that push them out of poverty. There is education technologies. It's amazing. I think we have such amazing progress in areas of health, longevity, general longevity, and so there is no reason to be too afraid technologies. Of course, there are some extremes, but it's more about application of technologies and players, from politicians, from extremists, and so it's again like about the knife. So the knife could be used to cut bread or to make harm. So hopefully, but so it has nothing to do with knife making technologies. It has to do with intentions of people or groups of people that are using these technologies.
That's true. I like to know that example. I had never heard of it, the knife. It made me think of, the word intention made me think of how you are called within the team of Blue Frontiers, which is the Oracle. Why are you called the Oracle of Blue Frontiers?
Well, I don't know. Maybe because I'm coming with so many crazy ideas that people just very politely are calling me Oracle.
Politely, yes. So within Blue Frontiers, you are managing a project called Blue Frontiers Global. And it's a project that will try to be, what is Blue Frontiers Global?
Well, we start to call it, first the idea was, we got the idea of a massive seasteading movement, but our co-founders and volunteers didn't like the abbreviation of this MSM. So, okay, MSM, I was not aware of that. So, okay, so I think you suggested to call it Global Seasteading Movement, and now we call it Blue Frontiers Global. So this is idea of a movement, of organization, of people that and this movement would cover areas which are much bigger that this project, this project in French Polynesia and projects that Blue Frontiers as a company is doing right now, because we have such amazing team, community of thinkers, of professionals who are working in different groups and attacking so many problems, and they could contribute to not only to Blue Frontiers but so to non-profit organizations. They could do much more. So they have much bigger potential that we could accommodate within this project within company of Blue Frontiers. And also we realize that there are several areas that are very important, and we cannot properly address them at Blue Frontiers, but our volunteers and also founders are very passionate about them. So namely, this is environment, and so there are a lot of very interesting and important parts if we talk about living on water, living in oceans. So there are important topics about environment. So how we could live in harmony with environment. What would be our strategy for example, living in lagoons? So how we could enhance marine life in these lagoons? Because of course we would like to be not source of problem, but actually to be a solution. And this is what we've been discussing about restorative activities of our floating platforms. So this Blue Frontiers Global is our attempt to help people, companies, startups to be better connected between each other, and to actually to serve them, to serve all interested, concerned people to find own space within this exciting community of people. And because it's so amazing how many interesting people, interesting projects are bubbling inside of our meetups and our online discussions. And it's so this is we see this as a non-profit international organization that would grow by local chapters in different countries that would run a lot of meetups, and these meetups would be crystallization points for local communities. And later in these local communities, people would do their own projects. They would maybe start to attack particular projects. Maybe they would start some startups, or they would team up together to create own seastead that they would timeshare, and this stead would be in French Polynesia or in Indian Ocean.
And what would be the role of Blue Frontiers in Blue Frontiers Global?
I guess Blue Frontiers, if we would be successful, we would, through our research and development, within next years, we would become producers, designers and producers, or maybe even mass producers of platforms that would be affordable, would be safe, seaworthy, modular, and on these platforms, communities would be able to establish sustainable, self-sufficient houses, villages, and ultimately islands.
And so on and so on. Igor, you're the last founder of the founder series of the Blue Frontiers podcast. And I know that some people have been wondering about the relation between Blue Frontiers and the Seasteading Institute and what has happened within Blue Frontiers since the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding. So why don't we use this as a chance for us to tell every one of our listeners all the research that has been taking place in the working groups in Blue Frontiers in the last, perhaps, 10 months?
Yeah, I think this active period is about 10 months, maybe, about so. So about relationships with the Seasteading Institute. I'm one of an ambassadors of the Seasteading Institute. I'm very interested in all this concepts that the Seasteading Institute has been developing, and I'm very curious, and I really wish to see this governance experimentation that the Seasteading Institute is about. And I guess Blue Frontiers is really a baby or spin-off of the Seasteading Institute, in a sense that we are now practically realizing the concept. We are working to make it happen, to create a space, maybe in the middle of nowhere, maybe not, where people would be able to experiment with governance, and would able in a very practical way to test this or that concepts. And so we are working on creation of this platforms for all these activities, for individuals, for companies. As maybe you already, it was already been discussed during previous podcasts, this concept of that we're working now in French Polynesia on special economic zone, which we call C zone, which would be very friendly for startups and also for founders of startups to do their projects. And coming back to your question about working groups, it was actually I didn't expect that this would I didn't expect last year that we would get so many dedicated and great people to self-organize themselves into different working groups. And I remember that this already started during our Tahiti conference. So people start to discuss the ideas, and then after this conference, people continue to discuss them online, and then through this online meetings, online groups, they were working in focused working groups, and so there was I just mentioned these groups. So one was about sustainable production of potable water and sustainable production of energy, and this group has been looking and exploring different ways to and state-of-the-art technologies to produce this two most important how to say substances or components of self-sufficient life. and just for the record, I would say so. Of course, we realized that if we have energy, we can actually get anything in the middle of nowhere. So if we have enough energy, we can get water. If we have energy and water, we can get enough green produce and protein. So also there are technologies to produce concrete out of magnesium-based concrete out of ocean water if we have enough energy. So there are so many things we can get and energy in, and it's really great that also every quarter or like every few months we see that cost of solar panels dropping down. It means that our ability to live sustainably and self-sufficiently in ocean is it's becoming more and more feasible for normal people, for very normal households. So okay, and speaking of energy, so there was another group which has been doing very interesting work is about food, so food production, and I think we're so lucky with people there who have hands-on experience on aquaculture, on hydroponics, and also on waste processing of creating biogas. This and another area which is very important for us, and actually it's I think a part of our mission is to create floating islands that would process their own waste.
Yes.
Work is to how to process our waste and how to get energy out of this, how to get necessary nutrients out of waste, how to sustain zero emissions on our platforms, how not to let even soap water to get into lagoons. And it's very, very interesting areas, very interesting approach that have been developed inside this working groups. Then another group was working on information technologies, how to make these platforms connected to internet, what would be the possibilities of running data centers on platforms. So this in another area. I initiated business development working groups that was working and exploring business opportunities. So what are the businesses that would be feasible there? So what are the, again, low-hanging fruits in terms of businesses, and what business concepts could be what would be opportunities in future? So how to create ecosystem of businesses on already on these first platforms. So what other working groups did I miss?
There was an design and engineering.
Oh, design and engineering, exactly. Yes, this is another working group which is which created. So it was led by Blue 21, and so the result of this working group was this concept that you would see at www.bluefrontiers.com. So this semicircle concept, like these floating hills, that you could, our current model of preliminary concept of floating community.
In French Polynesia. There
Right.
is also a blockchain group, and the result of that group is RC coin.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. This week, finally, our logo and the place to put your email. If you're listening to us right now, stop the podcast, go to the website, and put your email there to start the whitelisting process, and then come back to the podcast. So yes, there was also a blockchain group. So within the Blue Frontiers Global, will these working groups remain, or what will be the new working groups? How about think tanks? Because I've also heard you talking about working group, think tanks, skills-based projects, or single person projects, Blue Frontiers ambassadors. What is the whole panorama and diversity of possibilities that people will have with Blue Frontiers Global to get involved?
There is one of the reasons why Blue Frontiers Global was initiated is because we realized that these working groups are becoming less and less effective and difficult to manage and to make even meetings effective when they're becoming too large. And we also realize that this 50, 60 people is a maximum that we could accommodate, because otherwise, that the bigger is a meeting in a company or in any institution, less effective and efficient it is. So, and this is like in many companies, they found that the optimum size of a project group is 7, 8, 9, 10 people, not more. So, like in Amazon, they have this 2 pizza rule. So this project team should not be bigger than the amount of people that would be fed with just 2 pizzas.
Wow.
And so and then we when we start to discuss, we realize that project teams, they should be lean, small, very focused, but and they also should be project focused. However, there is also a utility in creating think tanks. This is how we are going to call this working groups in Blue Frontiers Global. Our idea is to create think tanks and to create them for people to focus on some domain. Like, for example, to focus on domain of floating precise professionals, people who are interested. So they would be communicating, they would be building up a knowledge base of companies, of people, of latest developments. And hopefully they also would be source of projects, of ideas. They would act as advisors to project teams, and they could be bigger. If they would become too big, so maybe they also could be split into more focused think tanks, and they would have a slight, they would have different mode of operations and project teams, and of course there would be this revolving door policy between all these teams, and some people, of course, they could be part of different think tanks, and they could be part of different projects, and I guess this at this stage this would be the best structure if we are speaking about several hundreds people, or I could anticipate that the community this year would start to grow very fast, and we could see this from application process on our website.
Yes, and it was impressive because every meeting, the average of the meeting, the all hands meeting we had was 35. So 35 people every single time were there throughout the whole weeks. That was amazing. It's a big achievement. And we are now that we are closer to the ICO launching date and closer to everything that is happening in French Polynesia, we are expecting a growth in the number of volunteers. So I see why you are thinking of Blue Frontiers very well. What can someone do if they want to get involved?
Oh, first of all, I think first is go online, register oneself, and then get yourself familiar with what seasteading is about, what Blue Frontiers is about. I would strongly recommend try to get your hands on Joe Quirk book called The Seasteading. And so this is a book by Joe and Patrick Friedman. I should have it. Yeah, here it is. It's so right.
Say is what did you say?
So, and this is a book. It's a perfect introduction to seasteading. Oh, I mean, I have something written by Joe. He's very good at drawing fish.
I know. Oh. So soon we are going to have a landing page for Blue Frontiers Global, right?
Yeah, we're going to have a landing page, and and I think the main task for people who are considering themselves joining Blue Frontiers Global is to learn about what we do, and also think of what you personally is curious about, and and to share expectations or projects you would like to join, or to maybe to offer. Maybe you need some help in ocean seasteading related areas, and so if we could be helpful somehow, so we would be very interested to get into cooperation.
So someone would also be able to bring their own project to Blue Frontiers for Blue Frontiers approval or evaluation, or to work with it?
Well, I believe that Blue Frontiers Global success depends on values that we would create for members. It's And I wish that we would be an organization that is bringing value to all members, and by connecting them, by providing them access to our contacts, to our know-how, to our database of technologies, and so being inside of this vibrant community, well, people would just be much better off with the idea, with their projects.
And also, as Nick says, he's impressed by the amount of good ideas that people have. So opening Blue Frontiers to the world, which is what Blue Frontiers Global is a way of bringing together in one same place, in one same platform, all the craft that goes behind it.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have no deficiency is amount of ideas, and from what we have at Blue at this business development business development working groups, I think some of these ideas are very potent and might result in very successful startups. Yeah. Maybe small businesses, but maybe also global businesses, and people who would be joining these working groups inside think tanks or project groups. So they might find themselves inside of very interesting and promising startups or groups.
I can testify that, yes. So how about people who want to do other type of things, like organizing a meetup? Blue Frontiers will endorse somehow, or how will Blue Frontiers get these people involved? Is there an ambassadorship program like with TSI, or what are you thinking along those lines?
Well, I myself, and I think many volunteers of the Seasteading Institute and Blue Frontiers, they already found that it's such a delight to go to some new city and then to meet another person who is interested in seasteading or is working on some seasteading related, ocean related, or sustainable technologies related project. Someone with whom we've been talking or online for this last months or a year. So it's really delightful, and I guess that that GSM could create more of this kind of delight by helping people to organize locally, and this would be people of all walks of life. So there would be students, researchers, businessmen, lawyers, and investors, and I'm sure that after these communities would grow bigger, they would start to create own projects. I think we already discussed this, and so because there would be people with ideas, there would be some people with means, and maybe they would come up with some projects that they would start to run locally, and maybe some startups, and if this would happen, I think a part of a mission of GSM of Blue Frontiers global mission would be fulfilled. So in this way, we created something new by meeting people. So these local chapters, let's call them local chapters, would be a very important part, and maybe I would, if there is, if you are listening to this podcast and you are wondering if there is any seasteading activity in your place, I would suggest go to Meetup, check if there is anything being initiated by Blue Frontiers or the Seasteading Institute in your area. And if it's not, I would suggest send us a note, suggest to organize meetup. We would take care of organizing this through meetup.com, and maybe we would even help with sending someone who would introduce Blue Frontiers, and from this very first step, you would able to initiate seasteading community and a local chapter of Blue Frontiers Global.
Yes, and please do get in touch. Well, Igor, I think I'm going to let you go now so that you can carry on with your busy night, but thank you very much for being the last guest of the Founder series. It worth the wait.
Thank you, Nathalie. I wish you to have a great Friday evening, and I suggest that maybe we would try to make another podcast, maybe also with someone of our engineering or architect friends, and maybe we could discuss technical parts more in detail, and because there are so many interesting concepts that would be probably interesting to hear for engineers, for listeners who are from engineering or shipbuilding, and there are several areas that I'm very passionate about. So I'm looking forward for more discussions on engineering.
Let's do so. We will have here Professor Wang, which I know you admire a lot.
Yes.
He'll be one, but definitely. I will be happy to have you again here, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie.
Thanks for joining us on the Blue Frontiers podcast. To learn more about our work and find out how you can support the project, visit blue-frontiers.com or visit our social channels. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Blue Frontiers, or shoot us a note via our website. If you learned something and enjoyed the show, tell a friend or leave us a positive review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our show and remember to join us for the next episode. See you next time.
Remember that you can also watch the video of this podcast looking for Blue Frontiers podcast on YouTube.